Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome all of you to SPIC MACAY Europe's second episode of our podcast series, Backstage Banter. Backstage Banter is a relatively new chapter that delves into the personal experiences of artists and the nitty-gritties of the art form and how they view and have shaped the art form. Myself, Bhavya, and my co-host Vaishnavi would like to extend a warm welcome to our wonderful artist, Dr. Deepti Omchery Bhalla. She is a versatile artist who is not only an exponent in Mohiniyattam but also in Carnatic music. She is an eminent dancer, a renowned singer, teacher, researcher, and scholar, and she's currently working as a senior professor of Carnatic music in University of Delhi. She has learned Kathakali for 12 years under the tutelage of several veteran gurus and proceeded with learning Mohiniyattam from the legendary late Kalamandalam Kalyani Kuttiyamma. And Deepti has contributed a lot in expanding the Mohiniyattam repertoire and by choreographing and also with her research in traditional Kerala music. And some of the many awards that she has conferred include the Kerala Sangeet Natak Academy Award, the Natya Ratna, and also the Narada Gana Sabha Award. Hello, welcome, Deepti ji.
To all of you, and I'm very happy to be here, Nadia, Vaishnavi, and Abhishek. And thank you for having this session with me. I'm delighted to be a part of this webinar that you are having. This online webcast that you are planning. And I hope whatever we interact with each other will be interesting to those who watch after this whole thing is recorded, broadcasted.
And yes, I would leave the floor to Vaishnavi to start over about Mohiniyattam.
Thank you, Bhavya. Welcome, Deepti ji. Soon we look forward to seeing you in Europe soon. I would like you to start with a brief introduction to the history of Mohiniyattam, like the timeline it started, the patronage it received, and the way we see it today, and what are the consequences that shaped Mohiniyattam. Maybe we can start with that and then delve in deeper into it.
See, as far as the origin of Mohiniyattam is concerned, though we don't have much authentic information about its origin, but there are indications that it has had its origin in the female dancers or dancing that took place in the temples of Kerala. Because Kerala was a recent small little state that was established. Before that, it was once part of the whole Dravidian area. And so there is a lot of intermingling of cultures and between the adjoining states, Tamil Nadu, and other states, especially Tamil Nadu. So there, whatever the dance forms or whatever the culture was prevalent in that Dravidian area, Kerala is supposed to have imbibed all that into its own region. Of course, after that, it evolved its own language, customs, traditions, and its own culture, which was very different, which became a little distinct and different from what you find today in Karnataka or Andhra or Kerala. Mm-hmm. These geographical boundaries came much later. It was much different earlier, you know. So when you go by that, yes, Mohiniyattam has had its root, the temples of Kerala, but it was not called as Mohiniyattam. It was called as in many names like Tali Nankas. Tali means temple and Nankai means beautiful hands. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the dancers who performed before the deities had beautiful hands. It could also mean that whatever they presented had beautiful gestures. They presented those mudras so beautifully that they were called as Nankai. Nan means beautiful and Kai means
hand.
So Tali Nanka, Tali means temple, dancers with beautiful gestural interpretations or gestural expression. So they had the roots in the temple. From the temple, when it reached to the courts of, it came from the sanctum to the temple stages. Now, when it came to the temple stages, obviously it was not to please the gods, but it was to please those people who were devotees of the gods. So when it came to, with that intent, it was presented on the stage proscenium, which was within the temple precincts, but outside the main sanctum. Then it developed a little more, because here the dancer had the liberty to improvise upon whatever little she was dancing on. In temple, she was strictly to go by what was the chanting and the verses that were chanting. She was only supporting those verses chanting. But when it came to the stage proscenium, there was a little slightly different. She had more liberty, but he had attacked dance. From the stage proscenium within the temple precincts, when it reached the courts of the royal princes and the royal kings and the royal patrons, then again it underwent another change. That was because here she had to cater to the demands of the spectators who were connoisseurs of art, lovers of art, who needed something more than what she was probably, or he was probably trying to express or present. So there was a kind of a competition which evolved through complexities in that art form. This art form, which was very simple in its footwork, in its gestures, in its body movement, facial expressions, now became technically complex. Because here, there were connoisseurs who demanded that. They wanted perfection in the art. They wanted everything to have its own permutation combinations and, expansion of that art. So here, more complexities were inculcated into the dance. And so it got developed into a dance form which had technique plus a repertoire. It had a complete repertoire which had a margam, which you called as margam. The southern Nritya, the Bharatanatyam or whatever art forms that came from the temples. When it entered the courts, they had a different name, what we know from what we know today. So in the southern Nritya, which was there in the courts, there was a distinct repertoire. From the royal patron, that is where you can say that Mohiniyattam actually got its structure, technique, and a repertoire. This was in the courts of Travancore Maharajas, especially Swati Tirunal, who was a patron and a great lover of Kerala art forms, and he promoted Kerala art forms and also music. He was very fond of music, and many Carnatic musicians and Hindustani musicians from all over the country, from the north, they used to come to his court, they used to sing, and he composed several of these compositions himself. That became actually the repertoire of Mohiniyattam. So we had a Cholkatta, we had a Padavarnam, we had a Padam, Jatiswaram, Tillana, everything that Swati Tirunal himself wrote, it became a part of Mohiniyattam repertoire. Unfortunately, because he died young, Mohiniyattam went into a kind of a shelf life, it had a dark period when it almost got obliterated or almost had a death towards maybe just after he passed away, because the next prince or the king who took over the throne actually promoted the Kathakali. So Mohiniyattam fell into a very kind of a dark age. Again, it was revived in 1930 by Makkavi Vadakol and Kuddaraja when they established the Kerala Kalamandalam. And whatever was, it had disintegrated and segregated all the dancers, because they had stopped performing and they didn't want to be known as Mohiniyattam dancers. So they all were living a very quiet and hidden lives. And they completely hid away from the performance. And he had to struggle. These two great connoisseurs and lovers of Mohiniyattam, not only Mohiniyattam, but other lost art forms of Kerala, they struggled in collecting these performers and gurus and exponents, bringing them under an umbrella called as Kerala Kalamandalam. That was under the same roof. They brought in all these exponents, and once again, they revived these lost art forms. And Mohiniyattam was one of those lost art forms, which was revived. And what we know today is very much we owe to these two patrons of art, Kavi and Mohiniyattam. And then onwards, of course, after the 20th century, the dancers, because we came out of the region of Kerala, we were fortunate that we could expand and develop this art form, which was confined to a very conventional and traditional repertoire when it was within the regional boundaries of Kerala. So till it was in Kerala, we could not, perhaps they were very, very strict about it, that they were very, I would say, orthodox and traditional, that they did not want any kind of innovations happening outside the format of what was already existing in. But when those dancers were living outside the boundaries of Kerala, we got a chance, we got an opportunity to do research in such a way that we could still connect to the Kerala Mohiniyattam, we could enhance the dance form by incorporating certain compositions which were belonging to the region of Kerala, but not found in the repertoire. So you see, that freedom, fortunately for us in the 20th and 21st century, did get, especially towards the late end, I would say, 20th and the 20th, late 20th century onwards, I would say, because of the globalization, so many festivals happening outside India also. These were opportunities where we could encash upon developing the whole art. Every dancer is trying now to see how it can evolve this art form so that it rises to the level that it's all over the world and is liked and enjoyed by everyone.
Oh, that's interesting, Deepti ji. I just had a question. When you said it was part of the temple, initially it was part of the temple dance. Was it part of the ritual? So when we see the purpose of dance, you said that later it came to the court. So the purpose was to serve to the patrons and the court. So was it initially part of the ritual in the sanctum?
Yes. You see, the temple rituals, when I say, apart from the chanting and recitation of the verses or whatever mantras that were recited, drumming, singing, and dancing are also important components of the daily rituals that were taking place in the temples of Kerala. So when these three components became important, dancing was very essential for pleasing the deities. They were not meant for invoking or revoking the powers, but they were meant to please the deities. While the mantras and the verses chanted were to invoke, the dancing was more towards the pleasing to the deities. So when you say you are pleasing the deities, it becomes the dancer herself personifies the deity. She herself becomes a Deva Shri. Deva means God and Shri means a woman. So a female goddess. So she became a Deva Stri who herself used to dance, who herself was pleased with dance. So here the dancer personified the goddess. And when she personified the goddess, the movements that she did not have any sound. It was very subtly conveyed. There was no hard footwork as you find today. There was no sharp sounding of the foot. And it was all soft, flowing movements that supported the chanting of the verses and that supported the recitation of the mantras or chanting of the mantras. So they were intended, the dancer was intended to please the god so that whatever the devotees were praying, the god will, it's a belief. These are all beliefs. You can't say this, but our belief and faith is what gives us the strength, is it not? Which is when you go to a temple, what you pray is actually you are trying to build in certain strength in your own mind and body, which you may not otherwise build up. So by dancing before the deity, strength and the power that the dancer got actually transformed her into a goddess herself. That is why you see some of the old dance forms will find even Nanyar, see today, which is still temples of Kerala. You will find the white colored dress she wears, a red blouse and a red head, and all ornamented with gold. It's all golden color. So when she wears a red headgear, a red blouse, and a white attire, she's actually personifying the goddess. So here, this is the connection that Mohiniyattam, in its origin, had this connection with these temples of Kerala. And that is why a lot of movements from Nanyar, which is a female temple dance form of Kerala, we have borrowed a lot of movements from Nanyar also.
I have
Oh,
a follow-up question from what you were saying, ma'am. So you were talking about there's not much thumping footwork in Mohiniyattam. So how is that? So I would just like a brief description or brief compare and contrast between the other classical dance forms in India. So how does it differ as opposed to Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi or Odissi or
See, the moment you take the art from the temples, if you see Manipuri dance, even today Manipuri dancers don't use belts at all. Because they still link their dance to temples or devotion
yes,
or to
yes,
God. So you will, even if they are performing today on a stage, you will never find them wearing bells, because that sound is a distraction to the whole process of the rituals. So, but the moment the other classical dance form, be it the Sadhir, Bharatanatyam, Kuchipudi, whatever you may call, all the other dance that which came out of the sanctum to a stage, then it was important that there had to be a footwork, there had to be a body movement, there had to be a facial expression. Nritta, Nritya, Natya. These three components were very important to make the dance form a classical form, different from devotional, different from traditional. They had to become something which today we establish as classical dance form. So these three components, Nritta, Nritya, Natya, are very, very essential for it to establish as a dance form in Indian classical dance. And to establish that, you cannot be all the times gliding your foot from one place to another.
right,
So there is some rhythm, there is a Trisha Gati, you have to, so there is a 3 beat, there is a 5 beat. We have 5 beats, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. These are the 5 beats we have, rhythms we have. You have to show to establish that, yes, your dance form is complex. So to establish that, you work on the rhythms. When you work on the rhythms, how do you show those? You have to establish your footwork. When you establish your footwork, obviously there has to be a sound. So all these requirements is what made the stage proscenium performance different from the temple proscenium, temple sanctum performance.
So underlying what I understand is a lot of evolution happens on focusing on the purpose of the dance form. So earlier it was in the temples, so the purpose was different, so the form was a bit different, and later when it came to cater to audience and cater to a few other realms of it, thus it evolved. So that is quite interesting that the purpose of the dance form is what
and in the modern era, people around with so much of high technological development. When I started performing on the stage, you see, at my generation, we didn't have those lights and sounds and so many advancements that the dance and even the makeup, to be very honest, we looked what we are. And today you find the dancers look so beautiful with the light and the sound and all, whatever little movements they are doing, it becomes so magnanimous, like it doubles and triples, I mean quadruples so many times it expands. And that makes the whole presentation very, very different from simple presentation on the stage, which is what my generation experienced. So today, you find the technology has further developed the dance. And so going from a blue, you want to show that there is a blue moonlit night, and so you don't need to work upon establishing through your gestures that you have a full moon, bright moon, a blue moonlit night. You don't have to show that. You can show through the lights, a blue light focusing. For a sunrise, you can have some kind of a red and yellow, amber color lights inside, using all that. So the technology has further developed this dance. But where the problem comes is, the more and more you depend on the technology, the less and less you are working upon the art form. So when you start working less and less upon the art form, internalizing becomes lesser and lesser. And if you don't internalize an art, it can never bring out the effect that you really, a spectator, requires to experience. You're not making the spectator experience what the art form can actually bring out, which we call as rasa, aesthetic experience. We can have a delightful performance. I can show a lot of rhythms, show a lot of movements, occupy the entire stage. The bigger, the better, and move from one corner to the other corner and show certain sculpturistic poses. I can do many things if I have a complete control of my body, and I'm doing yoga also alongside. But with the subtlety of my facial expression, can I bring out that small little feeling that triggers in the mind of the spectator, with which he says, oh, it was so spellbinding. It was ethereal. That you were dumbstruck. You forget to clap. You're just spellbound. That is the essence of Indian classical dance, which sometimes, I would say often, gets lost if there's a huge, big proscenium with a lot of light and some technological inputs coming into the performance. There is a danger.
Yeah. So I was also reading about the influence of Persian theater, how these side wings and the stage has become beautifully with when the Persian theater has influenced India, when we had a lot of people migrating here. So as you mentioned, it's quite like, how do you find the balance between these two? Like focusing more on the dance versus adding more layers with stage, lighting. Now we also see some productions where they project in the background on LED screens, and that adds another layer to it. So
Yes.
where do you see we should balance these two, and how do you see like that evolving in especially Mohiniyattam, your form?
See, that is one limitation that Mohiniyattam has had till now. Of course, that is changing now. With this multi-dimensional, multimedia presentations and all, where you have these LED screens, supporting your movements, and the dancer actually gets lost. So the smaller the chamber, if it's a chamber concert, Mohiniyattam stands to have a better impact on it, because it is all about subtle and restrained expressions. The moment you remove the subtlety and restrained expression from the dance form, then it is all about catering to a kind of a performance. It's not actually, I would say, bringing out the essence of the art, but it is bringing about a delightful experience in amongst the audience. That's all. You are not really touching the heart, the soul of the spectator. You are making them visually appealing. You are delighting them through what they are watching. So, but at the same time, this is also essential. If the art form has to survive, it has to remodule itself, remold itself. It has to transform itself. What we call today transformation is very, very important. when you have different spectators coming to watch who may not know the language, may not know anything about Mohiniyattam. If I do some abhinaya, which requires the person, the spectator, to have some knowledge about it, you cannot touch that person's heart. So how do you touch that person's heart? You have to show something which is existing in the real world. And what is existing in the real world are the emotions. What you show through your abhinaya, what you show through certain movements, through your hand movements and the footwork, which shows that connects to some animal, some bird, some situation in the life where you can show grief, you can show happiness, you can show anger, envy, jealousy, kinds of emotions that you are experiencing in real life, that if you bring it through your art, you immediately gel with the audience. But once the audience or the spectator gets used to seeing the same art form again and again and again, he starts understanding the art. That is when you have to come up with the real essence of the art. So both are important. The large prosceniums to cater to a larger audience, and the smaller chamber concerts to cater to those who want to know really about the art, the true art, which have always been, if you see our history, in the history also, those people who were real connoisseurs and lovers of art, very few. The general people were all who catered to folk music, folk dance, everything that was folk. Where it was a secular kind of music and dance, where people of the community came together and enjoyed some dancing, some music, singing. But those people really understood the art, whether music, classical music or dance, were very few. Because for that, you need to educate yourself. You cannot enjoy a dance or music without educating yourself about the art. So both are important for the art form to survive. Right?
Okay.
I hope I have said something which is clear.
No, definitely, ma'am. Thank you for beautifully explaining the entire evolution of Mohiniyattam and how it is to current day and the limitations, but also how it actually helps. I think we've not foreseen how. I think it's very nice to hear this from an expert, and because Vaishnavi and I are current day students, so we've only seen one side of it, but it's always nice to hear on how it has evolved over time as well. And we would actually like to move on to the next segment, and now make it a bit more interactive as well. And the next segment is called Hasta La Vista, which is focusing on hastas. And as we're aware that Mohiniyattam follows comprises of 24 hastas, as opposed to Kuchipudi and Bharatanatyam, which is what we're students of. So could you briefly elaborate on just what it comprises of and how it is maybe contrasting to other forms?
See, we have 24 hastas, which are alphabets. These are alphabets or letters with which we can form words, and almost 500 or maybe more words can be formed out of these 24 alphabets. And with this 500 words, we can have an entire story. We can, relate to present an entire story to the audience. So we have this pataka. Now, the text for every dance form is based on their regional customs, traditions, and identity. So obviously, whatever you are using, the gestures that you use in your art, to the regions. Like Kuchipudi, it is Andhra, Bharatanatyam, it is Tamil Nadu. So there are customs and traditions and rituals and many things, that make these gestures give some kind of an order of wearing the costume, using these hand gestures, and even for expressions. Okay, what you find, the people, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they sing or use their body language is different in Kerala from what you find today, maybe in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra, maybe in Carnatic, or maybe not. See, in South, you find people are more expressive. when it comes to talking. In conversation also, you'll find a lot of gestures like I'm using now. Right?
Yeah.
But when you go to northern side, you'll find they're little, perhaps, maybe not. It's my observation. They're not so expressive with their body language. They talk very beautifully. Probably their oral interaction is far more sweeter and better than the gestural language that we use in South. So every region has its own custom and tradition and culture with which we form different kinds of hand gestures and facial expressions. But when it comes to a classical dance form, lot of similarities are there because we have to follow a certain norm which has been set down to us, whether it is Natya Shastra, whether it is Abhinay Darpana, or whatever. These are the two prime, I think, texts that we are using today in the southern regions. But apart from these two texts, every region has its own gestural text or treatise. So in Hastalakshana Deepika, which is what the Kathakali and Mohiniyattam, we have these 24 Pataka, Rakyam. Can you see this?
Yes.
Yes,
Pataka,
yes.
Mushti, Kattari Mukham, we use for speaking. So Pataka is something that we use for dancing. And even the ear of the Pataka. And then you want to show a creeper. This is again a pataka. A creeper. Only thing is you have to use your eye also. The twining of the creeper. So there had to be a circle when you are showing. You just can't just show like this. You have to have at the base the creeper may be a little longer, and as it twines up, it goes into smaller circles. But you start with a larger circle. It twines and the circling movement becomes smaller and smaller till it falls without a support at the tip. Right? So you have Pataka, then you have Mudrakyam. Mudrakyam is when you want to show a desire. Like for instance, if I show something like this, probably you can guess that it is something connected to your chest,
heart,
something that is inside your body. So what is most important is your heart. Of course, lungs are also equally important, but when we connect to a dance form, we can connect only through our heart. We can connect through our lungs. So this is your heart. When you look up and down, it's the movement of your mudra with which you connect your hearts, right? Now, when you say whatever you are feeling in your heart, you are expressing outwards. So again, you are expressing. This is expressing what you feel inside. And then this is the desire. Suppose it's an So there is a subtle, you can't do too much of your
tummy.
It has to be very, very subtle. And
so does Mohiniyattam restrict the use of neck movement, or is it because
it's always straight? No, it's always straight. Because neck movement you can't use any other way. It is straight. But you can do like this. Suppose you want to this is the straight. When you are looking straight, your movement of the neck is straight. But when you want to turn your neck and look downwards, like the standing position, this is the standing position. This is how you hold. So the neck turns slightly towards the side. The movement remains continuous here. The movement cannot have a different direction, right? Except the neck movement slightly tilts to one side. Then Katakam is something I think is what I'm going to present in Dundubi Natyam when I come there. See, you have hold these two tips, your forefinger and the thumb, just the tip. Do not press it. You have to just touch it. Yeah. And when you are touching it, you have to be careful. The other three fingers should be taut. Very good.
Okay. Straight.
Never, your gestures should never be loose. It has to be very taut. So when you touch these two things, three fingers are very taut. The middle finger slowly comes down and touches the base of the thumb. Right? And you can feel the pressure here.
Yeah.
Pressure in your the wrist, right? So this.
I also think you have used this gesture quite a lot in your piece. So maybe if you can show how it is used.
Yeah,
in
Vinyoga,
the
then
different
maybe
Vinyogas.
Vaishnavi and I can try guessing maybe what the Vinyoga is.
This little finger bending forward and the little finger is up, just straight up, right?
Both are straight?
Yes.
Okay.
No, this should be tip.
Yeah, generally we do this.
We do this, yeah.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
But this is, I think you use it for a bird.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, for a bird we use this.
Okay.
More like a Tamarachuda.
Yeah, this is Suchi, and we bend this Tamarachuda is what I've taken. We've also taken it from the Natyashastra, because this you don't find in Hastalaksha. This is a mudra which is still not found there. So Katakam. Now, what are the different words that come into the Vinayam where I have used this? First, I have used this as in both the hands, using this Katakam. If you turn this inwards with the backside of your palm facing out, this becomes the Veena. This you must be using in Bharatanatyam, because this is an iconic image. Iconic image. Right? So this is Veena, and we also call it as Saraswati. Suppose you want to show Saraswati, you can hold this hand. The same thing when we use it above our head, since you can't see it, just say above, it becomes Padmanabha, that is Vishnu.
Okay.
Hold it like this above your head, becomes Vishnu. Now, if you hold it like this, it becomes Krishna's flute. Krishna, or because flute and Krishna are synonymous, like Veena and Saraswati are synonymous. Krishna are synonymous, right? So this is your flute. And you bring this down to your chest. This becomes the warriors of Shiva, Bhutaganas. Bhutaganas are the celestial warriors of Shiva. So this flute, when you bring it near your chest, becomes the warriors. And if you take it like this, it becomes the Veena, the Bhutaganas, the flute,
Krishna,
the Vishnu. And the same thing, suppose you want to show like this flowers, different flowers, or even money, or a mirror. This is a mirror, you look at the mirror, this becomes a mirror. Hold it like this, it becomes a woman. And so many things that come out of this particular Katakam. And that's how we use Katakam. Then Mushti is, of course, what we can show the good qualities in a person who has Kartarimukam is speaking or hearing, or these come.
So this is Kartarimukam?
Yes, when you hold the tip of your thumb to the middle of the forefinger.
Okay.
That becomes Kartari.
I think we call it, we have
Hamsapaksham.
Hamsapaksham, and this is Kartari Mukam. And
now this is Shikhara.
okay.
We have this in Mohiniyattam selection in Shikhara. So the names may vary, but the mudras may be the same. So Shukatundam, this is Shukatundam. Kapittakam, this is, to say that this is nectar. Hamsapaksham, we use generally to show the rising of the moon or the rising of the moon, and then the sway, the breeze, that the winds, soft flowing of the moving of the breeze, and also many other Sapaksham. Then Shikaram, that is you can stand as you and or to say two, that's also Shikaram.
Right.
Hamsasyam, this is Hamsa. It's again made very low. So these are, like that we have Hamsasyam, Hamsapaksham, Shikaram, Hamsasyam, Anjali, Namaste, Anjali, Ardhachandra, Ardhachandra. I think
we have, yes.
We do this.
Yes.
Yeah. So here we use this as Ardhachandra. This you can say, I, what,
okay.
and all these can.
Right. But it's also interesting to see, though the names are different, the Vinyogas are more or less the same, like a bit similar. And that's quite interesting.
So what would you use for a flower, ma'am? Because I think in Bharatanatyam, at least is
flowers, we often use lotus in most of the quadriternal composition, because he has been always addressing to Lord Padmanabha. So Lord Padmanabha, you often use this lotus flower.
Okay.
Because it is from his Nabhi, you have this flower, and number 6 in on the lotus flower. So movements of like lotus flower, eyes like the lotus, and as beautiful like the lotus flower. So lotus flower is all the time coming into the composition. Now for the lotus flower, you use Urnana.
What is it called, ma'am?
Urnanabha.
Yes.
That's the last. Urnanabha. Mukulam is for the buds. So sometimes for certain flowers we use this Mukulam Mudra also. So Mukulam and Kataka Mukam. So this, when you say this is a bud and you slowly open into a flower, you never hold it like this straight. The fingers are never straight. It's always bent. Slightly.
Okay.
So this bending hasta that you use called as Urnana.
Okay.
So what is this difference between this Vritta hasta and Vritta Mudra? Now here, it doesn't carry any meaning. It is just a hasta. So you say, this is Urnana, right? But when I bring it together and join these two fingers and thumb, I'm actually conveying some idea or some word meaning. And which is what? It is a Kamala. It is a lotus. So it then transforms itself to a flower, which has a name lotus. This becomes Nritya. So the same mudra, Vritta hasta, becomes mudra, and in your dancing, it takes the form of Vritta. Because here you are conveying something.
Yeah.
So these are very subtle differences that you find, but very distinct differences. Differentiates one from the other.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you for the how you for the Hasta Vinyogas, and I think it was quite nice for us to see just how the names change, but then also the different uses. But I think a couple of them we don't have, but overall it is very interesting to see.
But you must be having Tamra Chuda.
We have
we
have this. I think it's
yes.
But yes, we have this.
Which we call as Mukulam.
Yeah.
And
you have this, what is this?
Simhamukam.
You have, this is Mukuram, we use it for honeybee. So we don't actually.
You don't touch it?
We
Oh,
don't touch. It's slightly above. The fingers at the two middle and the ring fingers are bent. The other two are taut. The other two stand straight fingers. And the thumb is underneath these two middle and the ring finger, and it's vibrates.
okay.
We have many things. And of course, we have to show through our eyes expressions. It's not just
Yeah.
movement of things along. I mean, how it's moving, every movement of the eye has to follow the hand, and only it establishes what you exactly like. And similarly, Brahmaram, you have this also. Brahmaram we use for peacock feathers,
Mm-hmm.
singing, you know, we sing or the peacock feathers that we move as also quite often used in all classical dance. The common kind of a movement, of course, with different name, term is different.
Mm-hmm.
These are certain.
I think there's a lot more use of fingers, like shaking of fingers, compared to what.
Yes, yes. Because a lot of thought process has gone into the movements Kathakali, especially Kathakali, where these Hasta Mudras have been explored immensely. They've deeply explored these movements, not only the eye movements, which you find in Mohiniyattam. Mohiniyattam gives a lot of focus on the eye movements. Everything is expressed not through hand gestures, but through eye movements. In Kathakali, major part of the theory, because it's a theme, it's a story that the whole theater, it's a theatrical, classical theatrical presentation. So a lot of hasta mudras are also in. It's not just facial expressions, but hastas are also in. And so the movements of the hastas become very, very important when you come to Kathakali. Mohiniyattam has borrowed elements from Danyar Kutta, Kathakali, and from many other traditional arts. So, Kerala.
Okay. Well, really, I'm honestly intrigued by all the minute differences and how it is used. And I would we as much as I would like to continue on it, we would also like to delve into your personal experiences of this art form. I think I vaguely remember the last time I spoke to you, you mentioned that within the you changed quite a few things within the Mohiniyattam repertoire. So I think they were focused a lot more on Abhinaya and you introduced more Nritta sequences, if I remember correctly.
No,
Oh,
not true. The Abhinaya was already very well developed in Mohiniyattam by my own teacher, Kalyan Kutyamma, and so many other gurus who actually gave it a shape and structure once it was revived in Kerala. But what I did was that, you see, we were all following, even I, when I started learning, what I was, the padams, which are actually the compositions wherein which you can go in, explore every possible emotions through your facial expressions. You can all possible emotions of human life you can express. And the Swati Tirunal compositions, whether it was Padavarnam or Padam, had more the grief-stricken situations. You know, for him, it was always connecting to Lord, outpouring of his deep inner grief that he wanted to. Because there's a lot of history behind that political happenings were having and administration that came because of political upheaval. And all these, he could express that grief only through his compositions. Because of that, whatever I was performing, whether Padam or Padavam, it was all Vipralamba Shringara, all grief-stricken situations and emotions only that brought about happiness and sadness. Now, and number two, because it was heavily, the compositions were these lyrics that Swati had composed. It gave very little scope to the Nritta portion, Nritta and Nritya portion of the dance.
mm-hmm.
So, thanks to, I was very fortunate in having my mother, late mother, who's also a Padma Shri Award. Dr. Leela Omchery. She was an eminent musicologist who worked deep into the Sopana music of Kerala and who helped me in unearthing several compositions which had conveyed so many different emotions, wherein you had compositions which composed by Swati Tirunal but never entered the repertoire of Mohiniyattam, wherein you have the interaction of a heroine with a Saki. So there is a, there is a
Right.
quarrel, kind of a quarrel. Oh, you did this and oh, I did not do this. Those kinds of interaction. Then you had a Sambhoga Shringara padams that came into, oh Lord, you have suddenly come at my doorstep. I'm so happy and delighted and so blessed that you are here. I remember from childhood that how you used to play the flute and all these things, which brought about a different kind of a movement of the body, a different kind of a footwork, different kind of a facial expressions. So there I found such compositions which were Shabda Chali, Shiva Chali, Dundubi Natyam, which I am presenting, then Samvada Padam, interaction between two people, whether Sakhi or Naika, or Naika, whatever, two people when they have a samvad, a dialogue, what you call as a dialogue. So all these, then Ardhanarishwaras, Nritya Prabandhams, nobody had brought up. And all these things were already existing in the region, music of Kerala. But somehow, nobody took, perhaps because tradition was being brought down by gurus through their shishas, they were carried on within the region, tradition was maintained. Nobody came out with anything other than what was there in the repertoire. There was a lot of closed orthodoxy also. So perhaps because of that, nobody explored beyond what was already taught to them. They never went beyond. And if at all they went beyond the repertoire, it was again connected to our Puranas and epics, like Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavata, Mahabhagavatam, Devi Bhagavatam, everything which was very devotional. So whatever they tried to get in expanding the repertoire were again connecting to the devotional sacred literature or whatever poetries were there. So when I did my research, I fortunately had the liberty to bring out these compositions which were accepted by everybody in Kerala. He brought out through CDs and DVDs, and I could choreograph these compositions. And today people have accepted it because everybody, because of a large demand and for a further expansion, every style has to expand for its survival. So when you expand, you have to incorporate many elements that may not be there in the traditional form or the repertoire. Yeah. That's the only way you can expand. You have to bring in other modern themes, like you have when you go abroad. There are themes which are completely different from what the Indian themes are. They demystify the whole dance form sometimes to the extent that you find you are disconnected with the gods and goddesses and you're connected with the human beings. So, and sometimes, as I feel, that Indian classical dance can never be disconnected from the spiritual level. There has to be a spiritual content. You need to have that spiritual well-being in you to actually get connected to the Indian classical dance. You cannot disconnect it with the roots. You cannot remove it from its roots. But to remain connected with the roots, you have to probably evolve from the connection with probably the gods and goddesses, but have to remain connected at the spiritual level, where you are connected to the true self. If you call it in a philosophical or a spiritual level, I don't know how far the youth can really connect. But something when you are dancing, when I'm dancing, a point comes at your performance level when you are not Deepti. You get disconnected from Deepti. You are immersing yourself so deep into the content of the dancing performance that you enter into another plane where you are totally disconnected with the audience, the stage, whatever is surrounding, and you experience something which is which elevates your mind, which brings about a delight in your hearts, which makes you happy. That's why when you say you are a dancing, why do you learn dance? To elevate your mind, to bring about happiness. So then you are not yourself. You are something different. So that elevation of mind is what we say in I would say in my terms, is getting spiritually connected to something which is not existing. You can't give.
Material. I think that's my greatest takeaway from this session, is that though the context of as the context of dance changes, we can tweak the content, but we can never go away from the core philosophy of India and the core content of it.
The
And
essence of dance in general.
Because that is a reality. That's the actuality. That is the identity of a region. India is known for its cultural, the multifaceted cultural and diversity that we have. It is only because of these factors, and we cannot disconnect or cut away from the roots. And in the beginning, of course, when I started presenting all these composition and choreographies, I did encounter a lot of resistance. I wouldn't say that it was an easy path. I did encounter that whatever she's doing it from a researcher point of view, and this is not the tradition, this is not the conventional, so she should, so many things. But fortunately, by grace of God, whatever I did, because it remained in the format of Mohiniyattam. I never broke that format. It remained within the format. I explored what was given to me by my guru. And so slowly, people started accepting what I was doing. And many of my students have also now started doing it. Coming to another important is the aharya, the costume. See, when Kalyani Kutti Amma was very particular that this dance form is very devotional. You are connecting to Lord Padmanabha. Why? Because Swati Tirunal's compositions are all devotional, connecting to Padmanabha. So she would say, never wear something which is very flashy, whether it is ornaments or whether it's your dress. Because people should be glued to your eyes, your face, and what you're presenting. Not to wear something very flashy and colorful and all that. People will say, look at her.
Sari, look at her jewelry.
Sari, look at her. What waist she's wearing, what ornament she's wearing. So you are just getting yourself distracted to what she's looking on the stage. And it takes time for them to get connected to the actual act. By the time the dancer has completed, you still don't know what you were actually looking at. So she would always say, remain as simple as possible. Now, in today's dance, in today's current scenario, when you have to compete with the evolving aharya, the evolving costumes, then there has to be a change. A lot of change has been brought into Mohiniyattam costumes also. Colored costumes have come into being, and you have those precious stones, jewelry also, whereas Kalyani Kutti Amma never allowed us to wear precious stones. It was all gold jewelry. Have come into being. Now, when you bring all that, then if it does not contradict with the style, you can take it forward. So long as it is not, conflicting with the visual, and you feel that, okay, this is beautiful, and you don't start getting glued to what is being flashy around and all that. Whatever change comes has to be for the better of the form and not for something which is in conflict with the form. So if you're making any change with regards to aharya, you have to be very carefully think about what is it good for the dance form, or is it in conflict with the dance? If it is gelling with the dance form, go ahead with it. But suppose the white flowers that you tie to your head, because you have only white flower jasmines, growing in abundance in the region of Kerala. Now,
Mm-hmm.
suppose you are using another flower which does not belong to Kerala. How will you connect with the region?
Mm.
Suppose a flower like a daffodil or something that is growing in some other region, and you just put that on your head here. The moment the spectator watches, oh, this is not a flower that grows in Kerala. How
Kerala,
is she
yeah.
thinking? So there is one.
Very, yeah, as long as it gels with the local context, local
Yes,
culture, and from where the dance form evolves. So,
yes.
and the experimentation, when we experiment also, as long as it is in the format and structure of the form, as long as we stick inside that, we can experiment as much as uh,
Right.
we want. Yeah,
Yes. So
that's
whatever
interesting.
Haria you're wearing should belong to that region. And then you can
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for all the insights. And I think before we close our session, I'd like to quickly let everybody know that we are excited to announce a new concert with Deepti ji. She will be coming to the Netherlands, to Eindhoven, and we have our Mohiniyattam concert on 20th September. And whoever can, I urge everybody to attend. And in I have learned so much from just this podcast, so I'm looking forward so much to the concert and also our Q&A follow-up session there. Vaishnavi, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think I wanted to ask a lot more questions, and probably we will take it post the concert there.
Yes.
And even the audience, if you have more questions, make sure you attend the concert and interact with our eminent artist here. And the whole vision for this podcast series is that generally we tend to see dance as something related to movement and something restricted to stage, but we wanted to give our audience a sneak peek into what the artist thinks and what's their methodology of working with the dance form, and a bit into the history and the context of the dance form and all that. And I hope this will enrich your experience furthermore while you watch the concert. And we hope you'll enjoy watching Mohiniyattam. And also you will watch more and more of Mohiniyattam in the future as well, and extend your patronage to this dance form. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Vaishnavi, Bhatia, and Sheikh. And it was a pleasure talking to you and interacting with you. And I do hope as many youngsters can come and watch my performance at Eindhoven Institute. And I'm sure it will be I will be able to communicate through my art. And all of you will enjoy my performance.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much, Deepti ji. That was lovely interacting with you. We look forward to your concert, and thank you for this podcast as well, taking quite a bit of your valuable time for us to speak to us, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you so much, everyone. See you in the concert.
Yes.
Thank you.